Calaroga Shark Media.
Hi there, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news, a daily briefing on stand-up comedy, comedians, and the comedy industry. Jay Leno was on Judd Apatow's podcast, and thanks, Justin, for sending this one in. They started to discuss the Mount Rushmore of comedy, always a fun topic, and I don't know what to do with it, because I think people have a recency bias and get a little crazy, and it'll be like, want to put somebody who's currently performing up there, or like sometimes a shooting star. You know, these things are hard, and you only get 4 spots. So for me, George Carlin, Richard Pryor, and 2 I don't knows. And on any given day, I might give you a different answer. Carlin is undeniable, including if you listen to the very, very late George Carlin material, which at the time was described by people like me as angry. Boy, has it aged well. George Carlin is somehow the great prophet of the 21st century. So he's undeniable. And the other one who's undeniable is Richard Pryor. There are plenty of disciples of Richard Pryor, starting with Richard Pryor cover act Eddie Murphy, who I love, but let's just be real about it. And you can see Richard Pryor descendants to today's comedy. Now, who you would put in the other two, I don't know. So part of it is, how do you define the genre? Is Johnny Carson doing a monologue 4 nights a week for 30 years? Should he be in the list? Bob Hope for 80 years? And don't judge Bob Hope by what he did in his 80s and 90s. Go back and watch the Young Hope. Should he be there? Why aren't there any women on the mountain? Okay, should we put, say, Joan Rivers up on the list? I don't know. So Carlin, Pryor, I don't know. But Jay Leno gave his list. And listen to the name he uses for comedian number 1. I've never heard anyone call this person this other than Jay Leno.
Okay, my 4 would be... Richie, he was Richie Pryor when I know him. Now he's Richard Pryor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Richie Pryor, he would go on he was getting ready to do Live at the Sunset Strip, the first filmed comedy special for theaters, not HBO. And I followed him every night because you couldn't follow Richie. Yeah. And I realized I didn't have an hour worth of material. I had maybe 18 minutes. But then I just realized, throw out everything that doesn't get a laugh.
All right, Richard Pryor, Jay Leno and I are aligned there. Let's see who Jay Leno had as number 2.
2, Robert Klein. Because you have to understand, prior to Robert Klein, most comedians were men in their 30s or 40s that grew up during the Depression. And the kids today with these hippies with the long hair, you know, that was all that kind of stuff. Suddenly here was Robert Klein, middle-class guy, talking about things I would talk about with my friends. Because I couldn't do Depression-era stuff or make fun of the music today because that was my generation.
Interesting pick. I think Robert Klein has been largely forgotten. His name never comes up. Very, very interesting. All right, at number 3, Jay Leno, who do you have?
Next would be Bob Newhart. He was the close-up magician of comedy. You know, Newhart had the great, it was like a slider, like an inside fastball. He had a bit about the first astronaut to have extraterrestrial communication. So it comes down from, the thing lands, and of course he's the first. So all the press is asking him questions. And a reporter says, how far ahead of us are these aliens? And he says, about 6 weeks. And it's 2 weeks is too soon. 6 months is too far ahead. But 6 weeks, you cannot catch up. It's finding the right turn. 6 weeks is exactly right.
Not crazy. Again, as time marches on, mentioned a little less and less. A unique voice, one of the greats, Rushmore. That's another thing. All right. Jay, who do you have for number 4?
And of course, Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney Dangerfield was the economy of words. He could get to the joke quicker. I knew Rodney for 40 years. I have no idea if he's a Democrat or Republican. We never discussed. It was just jokes. It was the, like the joke about...
One after another.
Yeah, the idea that my doctor said I need a stool sample, a semen sample, and a urine sample. And I gave my underpants.
That's an interesting take by Jay Leno. Not sure I agree. Again, I won't throw, I want to say rocks. I'm throwing rocks at a mountain. I won't throw rocks at any of these picks, but I don't know. Carlin, Pryor, I don't know. The conversation did go on. Jay Leno said if he had a fifth pick, it would be George Carlin. And I had, I don't know when I even saw this story, but I've just been sitting on it for an episode like today. Back in 2014, Jay Leno was on Craig Ferguson's show. I don't remember that happening, but I believe everybody. And Craig asked Jay Leno if Jay's mind ever drifted when one of the guests was not all that interesting. Jay said, the classic examples I had on one of these reality stars, Trista, who apparently is Trista Sutter. Jay said, from one of those bachelorettes. And I'm looking at the side of her head. I couldn't be less interested. I'd never seen this stupid reality show. You know what it was. And Jay said to make it worse, Jay says he wraps up the show, he leaves. I go out in the parking lot. There's a woman standing next to me with a boyfriend. She says, can I have a picture? And I go, sure. How you doing? She says, good. And Jay asks her, what's your name? It was the woman he had just interviewed on The Tonight Show. That's amazing. Kevin Nealon was on Icon versus Icon. He said, I learned from so many comics. I bartended at the Improv, so I was there all the time, and I'd see these comics come that I really enjoyed and was a fan of. Every night I'd watch them perform and take it all in. That's how I learned, by watching, and I loved it. It never even felt like work to me. There were comics like Jay Leno and Richard Lewis, who I watched closely. Andy Kaufman was a huge influence on me because he was so unique, so different, and so interesting. He played so much with the audience's mind, leading him in one direction, leaving people unsure of what he was doing, and really pushing boundaries. I also watched Seinfeld perform because we came up around the same time, more or less. Good advice from Kevin Nealon about the comedy industry. It's a business. You can't take things personally. I learned that a long time ago, and things don't really affect me that much anymore. I even think in regular life, I'm not easily shaken. I don't want to say I'm dead inside, because I'm not, but I've gotten used to a lot of rejection and disappointment, especially in the early stages. More from that Forbes conversation between Jerry Seinfeld and Nate Bargatze. Jerry Seinfeld was curious, what's it like touring for you these days in terms of workload? Nate said, it's like a gym. It's a muscle. You got to stay on top of it. When you don't go out for 2 weeks and then you get on stage and you're like, rough, I'm awful. Jerry was like, what about when your wife wants to go on vacation? Nate said he'll try and pop in somewhere to do one show to stay fresh. Jerry said, it's funny how fast it goes. I find not only can you not remember lines, but you lose your nerve that you should even be doing this. Who am I talking to in front of all these people? Wow, Jerry Seinfeld thinking that. Nate said, yeah, there's a thing in your head that goes like, who do you think you are? Are you out of your mind? Nate continued, I had to work on my own mind wandering. I had to work on pulling my mind back to the story of the joke I was telling. Every time I'm telling it, I visualize it. I love it so much. And you're in front of a different crowd every night because I'm in the round. I'll pick like 4 people. It might be an older lady. It could be a family further back, a woman with her husband. You keep an eye on them. It's a good way to keep it gauged. Like, is it too harsh? You're picking 4 people to do the show for, weirdly enough, instead of a mass. Nate said, I like stand-up in the arenas. It's really pushing stand-up to this higher level. I've got big screens, a sound system. It's like watching a live special. It's about the community and everybody laughing. You want to give them a full show. When they all leave, hopefully they're very happy. Rob Riggle spoke with Clutch Points. Rob said, getting on Saturday Night Live was a dream come true. It was something I'd worked for a long, long time, and when it finally happened, it was hard to process. And then being on the stage when they roll credits, and I've watched it my whole life, when they roll credits, everyone's on stage. To be on that stage, looking back out toward the audience and in the cameras, it was surreal. Being on The Daily Show, getting that job was a great, great moment. Getting to do movies with people that I admire, getting to do scenes with Tom Hanks or people you just love their work and appreciate them so much, and then you find yourself at a scene with them. I've worked with Rob, I think twice. Found him to be super, super awesome in person. What a great guy. Rob wrote a book, Grit, Spit, and Never Quit. He explained, you get to a point where you tell enough stories and people go, hey, you should write a book. And you go, all right. And then you hear that enough times, you're like, all right, maybe I should. And then I write down my goals every year at the beginning of the year. So I wrote down, I'm going to write a book. But it was the one goal that didn't get accomplished. It just kept rolling and rolling over until finally I was ashamed of myself. And I said, write the book. And so I did. It took 2 years. And he explains, you got to remember, now, it's not just like I locked myself in a log cabin and sat down and wrote. That's not how it works. I got to go out there. I eat what I kill. I'm out there hustling for work every day, and if I get a show or I get a movie, I got to do that, and then everything gets put on hold, so it takes time to grind out a book. And Russell Peters told a fun story about NBA star Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin has dabbled with comedy. Russell runs into Blake Griffin and goes, hey, I'm a big fan. What are you doing here? Blake Griffin goes, I'm trying comedy. Russell goes, really? But you're a basketball player. Blake goes, yeah. Russell says, well, what are you? Because you got red hair. Blake says, I'm mixed. Russell, where'd you grow up? I think you grew up in Milwaukee or something. Oklahoma? It's got to suck being a big half-black kid with red hair in Oklahoma. No wonder you're good at it. And his face is like, what the F? Russell says, I'm like, anyway, good luck, stupid. That's just how I am. So fast forward in time, Russell Peters is courtside at the Raptors game. Blake Griffin playing for Detroit. Russell yells out, Blake, Blake. And Blake Griffin turns, sees Russell Peters, and he goes, F you. And that's your comedy news for today. See you tomorrow.